Guys, we got Ryan Roberts on the line. He does film breakdowns for NFL Draft Bible. He writes for the Pro Football Ready, NFL Draft Lounge, and with the first pick. Ryan, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Grant. How are you, man?
Man, doing good. NFL Draft coming around, so it's pretty fun. Get to evaluate the college prospects and think about the draft and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm lucky enough to get up to Indianapolis this year for the Combine, so I'm super excited, man.
Oh, man, this is going to be your first year going to the Combine?
Yeah, first year. It's been a kind of a whirlwind this year, meeting some new people and getting some new opportunities. So, yeah, first time up in Indianapolis in general. I've only been through Indiana. Went to Notre Dame Stadium in South Bend a couple years ago. So this is my first time in Indianapolis, so I'm really excited about it.
Awesome. That's going to be dope, man. And, just reading off your profile and seeing what you've been doing, you basically do everything for the draft, right?
We for a while now been doing, podcasts, done a lot of interviews with prospects from last year, this year, a lot of freelance writing, scouting reports, articles, just doing it all. I've been working on the NFL Draft Bible draft guide that's coming out in a few weeks here as well. So, it's been a lot of new experiences, a lot of fun. So, it's draft all year round for me. So it's just a lot of fun,
Okay, so the Miami Hurricanes, they're actually going to have 8 players invited to the Combine, so that's pretty cool. And I definitely want to talk about what you think about those players. But I just kind of, in general, when you go into looking at a prospect, what's kind of the process of you checking out a prospect that maybe you've never heard of? How do you go about doing that and forming your opinion of them?
It's a really interesting conversation, really, because I talk to a lot of different draft guys on a daily basis, and everyone I feel like has their own method, their own process. For me personally, I like to get 3 games on them, a kind of a cold watch. I don't want to know too much about them. I watch those 3 games, and then I'll go back and I start to do research on them. I like to listen to interviews. I like to read into their backstory a little bit, kind of understand them a little bit from a personal level. And then as I get back to closer to the draft, I like to go rewatch those games if possible, and then obviously add on to that game list as more games in all 22 or cut-ups on YouTube are available. So I really try to kind of do like a twofold. I want to know the personal side of things, and obviously the film is the most important thing. So it's really fun, though. Just your question. Everyone has their own process. For me, cold watch, some personal information, and then going back and watching and make sure that I'm seeing everything that I saw the first time around.
Okay. Is there a prospect that maybe the mainstream media or a lot of people were against this prospect, but you kind of said, no, this is going to be a guy down the line that you need to watch? Is there a prospect in your past that you could think of that you were really right on that excited you, once he got drafted and had a good career in the NFL or anything like that?
I feel like you always have your hits and your misses. I mean, one guy that I know, I watched Luke Kuechly for a long time at Boston College, and he was an incredible player. And a lot of people going up to the Combine process were wondering what type of athlete he was, and they were trying to second guess him. And he became one of my favorite football players. Obviously, he ran the 4.58 or whatever he ran at the Combine, and he kind of checked those boxes. But I just feel like he's one guy that really pops in my head. If I had a guy this year, more recently, I would say that I feel like a lot of people are really just overthinking Andrew Thomas from Georgia. I think that he's still my number 1 offensive tackle on my board personally, and I just feel like some guys look a little too much into the flash, and they just kind of overlook that there's baseline attributes that you need, which a guy like Andrew Thomas hits all of those. And I think that just because he's in a class with guys like Jedrick Wills and Tristan Wirfs, who are excellent athletes, that his athleticism is a little undersold, but he's a guy is currently getting overlooked, in my opinion.
Okay. So have you had a chance to look at the 8 guys that Miami's has going into the Combine, into the draft this year? Have you had a chance to look over some of those guys?
Yeah, I have, and I will say 4 out of 8 I've done my final breakdown, my final write-ups on, and the other 4 guys I've done my preliminary stuff, and I'm just waiting to get to their final film. So really excited about this class overall. That's why, when you brought this up to me, I was excited to talk about it. Because like you said, 8 guys going to the combine, that's a high number. And despite the struggles that Miami has had this past season, there's a ton of talent coming out, and a couple guys that I'm really excited about from this list.
So just from the guys from this list and that you've done, your film watch on and research on, who do you think has the most talent that projects to have the best career going into the NFL out of this class?
The easy answer for me would be Jeff Thomas, the wide receiver. I feel like he's had some baggage off the field, which teams will have to do their research on when he goes to the combine and in the individual workouts and the meetings individually, and that's probably even more important than what he's actually going to test, because I have a feeling he's going to run in the 4.3s. He's going to test out of the world. When I see him, I feel like he checks so many of the boxes. He's not the big physical guy that you want, but the releases off the line of scrimmage are exemplary. He makes some plays through traffic, through contact that you don't expect for a guy's size, and then he has those speed attributes. He's a vertical-based receiver that can play a little on the outside as like a Z receiver, but also in the slot. I feel like you can do so many different things, get him on mismatches, whether as a drag or running something more vertical-based. And I'm really excited about Jeff Thomas, and I hope that he checks those boxes as far as the off-field character concerns, because I feel like the sky's the limit if you really start to get down into this guy's overall potential.
I agree 100% with that, because Jeff Thomas we switched offensive coordinators, so his numbers didn't look as great as last year. But when you look at his film, man, he has I like to call him the GPS tracker, because he tracks the ball so well when it's up in the air for a guy his size. And then I've always said, once Jeff Thomas goes to that combine and he runs that 40, anybody who didn't know about him will soon know about him, because the guy is blazing fast.
Oh, absolutely, man. If you're a guy that follows recruiting heavily, I mean, he was a guy coming out of, I think he's originally from Illinois, right? Because he almost transferred to Illinois this past offseason. And he's a guy that I was super excited about. He kind of fits that Miami playmaker kind of thing going on down there. And like I said, I just hope he really checks the boxes as far as off-field stuff, because there's a lot to work with, man. I mean, if we're talking about a potential day 2 talent, now I feel like he might not be the highest player drafted of the Miami guys, just because we have to see what the character stuff is. But talent-wise, I think firmly he would be somewhere second, third round if it was just solely based on talent.
Okay, so Miami has 2 defensive linemen. We have John Garvin, and then we had a grad transfer to come over in Trayvon Hill. Both of those guys will be at the combine. Both of them playing defensive linemen. Trayvon Hill is more of a stand-up guy, but can play with his hand in the ground. Which one do you like better out of the 2?
I actually like Garvin a lot more, and it was kind of a mixed bag this year. I didn't love his film in 2019 as far as Garvin, but when I went back to his 2018, a little more in better shape. He looked a little quicker off the line. He seemed like he was moving better in space. Trayvon Hill, who is a guy, like you mentioned, transfer over from Virginia Tech, he shows flashes, but there's just not consistency to his game. He's a stand-up rusher, like you said. He's going to have to be, because he's listed at like 233, 234. He just doesn't have a physical element to his game. So if I had to bank on traits right now, I would definitely take Garvin out of those 2.
Who do you think will be the highest drafted Miami Hurricane out of this group?
If I was a betting man, I would probably go Quarterman, Shaq Quarterman, the inside linebacker. I feel like he presents himself as probably the safest player. There's guys like Garvin and Jeff Thomas and maybe even Bandy, the corner, that might have much higher ceilings to what they potentially could do, but I feel like there's just such a safety with what Shaq Quarterman does inside. He's not going to blow you away with short area quickness, change of direction, but he's going to be able to do consistent run fits inside. And he's a guy that you can depend on, whether it is, filling the right gap, being a quarterback of a defense. He has those traits to at least transition to a first and second down player at the very least. So he's kind of the safer pick out of this group, but I feel like a lot of things, what he does baseline, are what NFL evaluators are looking for, at least on the early first and second down run stopping opportunities.
All right, a lot of people, I guess the narrative with Shaq Quarterman is he wasn't going to be fast enough for the NFL. His lateral speed and coverage of, the big, fast tight end. What would you say to the people who has that narrative of him?
I feel like athletically, Shaq is a pretty explosive player just in a straight line. I feel like there are some concerns definitely with him laterally. I don't think he's going to be a guy that's ever going to be a huge producer on passing downs, just because I feel like if he is going to be that player, at best he's going to have to improve angles. I feel like his angles of attack are not the best going to the perimeter, even as a run support player. But I feel like in a straight line, if we're talking just a linear athlete, I feel like Shaq's fine. It's just I think that he's a little stiff transitioning laterally.
Okay, and we've made it through this conversation without even mentioning DJ Dallas. Now, I'm a big fan of DJ Dallas, running back. He started off playing wide receiver, then got moved to running back, and I thought he made the transition pretty well. Definitely had some big-time moments at Miami. What are your thoughts on DJ Dallas?
He's a fun guy, man. Like, he really is. Like you said, he came in and he was kind of I know he was a high school quarterback, and he was trying to find his fit at the next level. And he was a guy that early on in his career, you saw him run a lot of jet sweeps. They did stuff with him in the pass game. And then obviously the last couple of years, he's been a more traditional running back. And I feel like the tools are obvious. He does some things in the screen game that are awesome. When you get this guy into the open space, he makes guys miss. He has that opportunity. He's a tough guy to corral, and he has really nice contact balance considering his limited time as a traditional running back. I feel like he's just a little behind the eight ball as far as instincts as a running back, being able to understand where gaps are going to potentially come open in zone concepts, different things like that. But if we're talking about a high upside guy, I feel like DJ Dallas is getting really slept on in this crew, and I feel like he has every physical tool you would look at, especially in a league that more and more is wanting guys that can take advantage of space, that can manipulate space. I feel like DJ Dallas is going to be a better NFL player than he was a college player.
Okay, and then the last couple guys are just, what are your thoughts on KJ Osborne, the wide receiver, and Michael Pinkney, the other linebacker that's coming out with Shaq Quarterman?
So a couple notes I have on KJ. Obviously, he's a transfer from Buffalo, grad transfer, and he got a little bit of buzz going into Miami just because he was a really rock-solid player for Buffalo, along with Anthony Johnson and Tyree Jackson throwing him the football. And I just feel like there's a smoothness to him. He does the things he could play. He could play inside in the slot. He could play some Z. You can motion him, short motions. You could do a little different things with him as far as alignment. And there's just a consistency to him. Solid hands. He does everything well. I just don't know if he's a dynamic athlete in any way. But I feel like he's a guy that can carve a niche. He could do some of the dirty work, blocking. He shows a lot of effort in that area. So KJ, I feel like he's just a really solid football player. I don't know if you'll hear his name until later in the day three, or maybe even as an undrafted guy, but he's a guy that has intangibles that could potentially make a roster. And last guy that you mentioned, Michael Pinkney. Oh, man, he was frustrating for me, honestly. I watched him, and, you see the tackle for loss production. You see some of the sack production, 4-year starter. And I remember when he was a freshman, everyone was really excited about that whole group, him and McLeod and Quarterman, and everyone was really excited about their future. And I just didn't feel like Pinkney got any better. He's a little undersized, and I just feel like he was not the athlete that he was originally billed at. He's just kind of a high cut, little awkward in his movements. So he's a guy that I think is just going to have to create a niche on special teams early on, and then hopefully he's able to develop into a more serviceable player where he can get some defensive snaps. But I would say out of all these guys, Pinkney was probably my most frustrating watch overall.
Okay. looking at this list, does Miami have anybody that's going to go in the first round?
I don't think so. I mean, like we said, if Jeff Thomas didn't have the off-field stuff, he's a guy that's, a day two talent, so he could always have snuck in there. But I feel like there's nobody right now that I would look at and be like, that's a guy who's potentially going to go in the first. If Quarterman was maybe a little better of an athlete, you might kind of talk me into it. But I definitely wouldn't put money on it if that's what you're thinking.
Okay, guys, we're talking to Ryan Roberts from the NFL Draft Bible. Let's say we're talking 3-4 years down the line. Who's going to be the Miami Hurricane that we're still talking about out of this class?
I mean, we talked about him a lot, but I would say as long as everything is straight on off the field, Jeff Thomas is definitely that guy. Man. He just strikes me as a guy, man. Like New Orleans might pick him up in like the third or fourth round, whatever it is, and then he's that vertical threat, kind of like Ted Ginn's been the last couple years. And the other guy maybe I would mention possibility is Bandy. I feel like some people are going to knock him for his size, but he fits that prototypical nickel corner role, and it's a starting role now at this point. So I really did like a lot of Bandy's film overall.
Man, I think we getting some some Jeff Thomas love. He's with the Miami Hurricane fan base. He's hit or miss. You're gonna find somebody that thinks highly of Jeff Thomas. Then you're gonna think people who don't think that much of him. I'm one of the people who I think, he did have some off the field situations with the team, but I mean, I think we've had a lot of frustrating seasons these last couple seasons. And I really like Jeff Thomas. So it's good to hear somebody who evaluates him at the next level think so highly of him.
Yeah, man, I mean, honestly, his film is a blast, honestly, especially last season, the 2018 film. Like, you just don't see guys with that lack of size, because usually you would think that a guy could get beat up at the line of scrimmage, but Jeff Thomas has some of the best releases in this entire class. And if you just took his 10 best plays on the season, whether that be 2019, 2018, it looks like he's in that rivalry with guys like Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy and that upper echelon. So his best plays are right up there in this class. The problem is the consistency part of everything. And like you said, the team struggled a bit. The quarterback position hasn't been great over the last couple of years. So being in a system where you really take what Jeff Thomas does best and you have consistency at a quarterback position, at an offensive coordinator position, I feel like this guy really has sky's the limit type of potential. I really do like him at least as a vertical threat role at the next level.
All right, so I'm just going to run through these names again, and just if you could just give me a round that let's say you were the GM of a team, what round would you take them? Okay, I'm just going to throw out the names, right, and then you just tell me if you were the GM, what round would you take them on? Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, DJ Dallas.
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm going to go 5th rounds.
5th round for my boy DJ.
He's a low developmental, man. Like there's things obviously to love, but I mean, like I said, I think his best football is definitely ahead of him.
So what do you think, DJ? What are improvements that he could make?
It's honestly just from a field perspective. I know he was an option quarterback in high school. He did a lot of things in the quarterback run game when he was, coming out of high school. But there's just some things feel-wise, because I know Miami runs a lot of inside zone, and there's just a lack of patience sometimes out of his stance. There's not being able to read as efficiently as possible, and then there's just some things with like his feet getting a little slow through contact and different things. So it's honestly just he needs a good running back coach. He needs a good offensive coordinator that knows how to kind of accentuate his strengths while he hits those, while he gets help in those areas that he needs refinement in.
Okay, KJ Osborne.
I'd say 7th round.
Ooh. Jeff Thomas.
3rd round.
John Garvin.
I say he goes higher than some people think. I say 4th round.
4th round for John. Okay. Trayvon Hill.
Undrafted.
Really?
Yeah, man. He's a tough one.
Undrafted. But
He's a tough one.
okay. Let me tell you what I like about Trayvon, and you can let me know if I'm wrong. Trayvon Hill has some of the best defensive line moves I've seen. Like I feel like he has several different moves. He can go to the club rip. He can go to the quick swipe. He can do the spin. He can do the half. He's done a half spin. Mm-hmm. Man, what do you think he needs to improve on?
I just feel like he's putting himself into such a small role at the next level with the lack of power in his game. There's no ability to convert speed to power. I get what you're saying. Like there is flashes of hand usage. I'll give you that. Different types of moves. There is things to build off of. I was expecting so much more from him this year, and I just didn't get it. You know, and he's a frustrating one, but I mean, he's a guy that's going to have a chance because, like you said, there is stuff to work with. I just feel like there is several questions, and obviously he'll have to answer some questions about, you know, getting dismissed for Virginia Tech and that kind of stuff too. So,
yeah, I think we forget about that. What about Michael Pickney?
I would say 7th round or undrafted.
Okay. Shaq Quarterman.
I think Shaq goes in the early 3rd round just because of consistency.
Early 3rd round, okay. And then Trajan Bandy is similar to Jeff Thomas when it comes to the Miami Hurricane fan base. A lot of people thought Trajan Bandy should have stayed another year. He decides to come out. If you were a GM, where would you draft him?
So I'm expecting him to test pretty well. I'm going to say he is, just because there's a stigma with nickel backs still, you know, nickel corners, being a specialist type of player. I'm going to say he goes early day 3, somewhere in the 4th round.
Okay. Guys, we're talking to Ryan Roberts from the NFL Draft Bible. Make sure y'all check out the NFL Draft Bible, which is going to have a lot of content about the NFL Draft and also the NFL Draft Guide. Just a couple more questions, Ryan. I know I got a lot of Miami Dolphin fans that listens to the podcast. So, do you think they're going to get Tua, or who do you look at to see who does Miami get in the first round? I know they got the 5th and the 18th.
Yeah. This is actually a fun conversation because my dad's actually a diehard Miami Dolphins fan. So I'm very close to this conversation. I felt like early in this injury process for Tua that it looked like you could probably just stick at 5 and that would be fine. You know, you would have your opportunity. Now, with everything sounding like everything's progressing really well, and now there's starting to be some talks at Detroit at the 3rd pick, potentially dealing Matt Stafford and needing their guy. It's going to be interesting to see if someone tries to get up in front of Miami at 4. I would still say that I think that Tua is a high possibility for Miami. I think there's a very good chance that it happens, and maybe Miami packages a couple of those picks to move up a spot or two and make sure that they secure their guy. But for me personally, I feel like I would just stick at 5, see what happens. And, you know, if worse comes to worse, I know Miami fans are not going to love this mindset. But, you know, next year with Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields potentially being on the horizon, sticking it out, seeing what comes, and maybe even creating more draft capital with some trade backs might be a possibility because they obviously have a lot of opportunity with 3 first-round picks. And they're a bad roster. So being able to build that roster up and maybe waiting till 2021 might be an option. But I still feel relatively strong that Tua might be available there at number 5.
Okay, and then what about for that 18th and the 26th pick?
I feel like their biggest needs besides, you know, getting their quarterback of the future is offensive line is horrible. It's really bad. I mean, just call it what it is. They had Julian Davenport playing left tackle, who is terrible. They had Michael Dieter, who is playing left guard, who's he had his struggles as a rookie, but I feel like he's going to be okay moving forward. Their offensive tackle has to be a point of emphasis. There's talks now with Tristan Wirfs from Iowa falling potentially, and if he was available there at 18 for Miami, that would be a perfect fit for them. I mean, honestly, if Andrew Thomas falls, one of those guys falls to the Miami Dolphins, that is an ideal situation. Now, maybe Mekhi Becton might be an opportunity there for them as well from Louisville. And I feel like offensive line is definitely the point of emphasis for them to really attack there. And maybe I recently did a mock draft where I had them taking 2 offensive linemen in the first round. Besides for that, I might look defensive end, edge if the right guy's on the board, but definitely offensive line has to be the huge point of emphasis for them.
All right, my man. Just a couple more quick questions here, just in general about the draft. If you're the Washington Redskins, you taking Chase Young or Isaiah Simmons?
Taking Chase Young, man. He's got to be the guy. I mean, I know Isaiah Simmons is really tempting, being that unicorn, being that guy that could literally do anything, and that's not hyperbole. Like, he can honestly do whatever you want for him to do, whether that is in a strong safety role, in a linebacker role, off ball, coming off the edge as a blitzer, coming A-gap, like whatever you need him to do, he could do. But I just feel like Chase Young is the best football player in the draft. You don't have a need a quarterback because you're going to see what Dwayne Haskins has for you. So I feel like Chase Young has to be that pick at 2.
Okay, who has the better career, Tua or Justin Herbert?
I'm a Tua guy, so I'm gonna go Tua. I'm not a big believer in Justin Herbert. I have a first-round grade on him, but there are some things character-wise and some inconsistencies, the ability to improve over the last 3 years that I have a lot of question marks about. So injury obviously is going to play a big role in that, but if that debate is not decided because of an injury, I'm going to go Tua by a pretty hefty margin.
All right, who do you think is the most underrated player in this draft? Just an underrated player that a lot of people don't think about, that aren't talking about, that you have a high grade on.
All right, this one's fun. This one's really fun because it's been a guy that I've been talking about on Twitter for a while now, and a couple pieces I've written. It's a draft crush, man. I got Justin Madubuike, who is a defensive tackle out of Texas A&M. I put a first-round grade on him, and I don't think anybody I've seen is quite that high. I know Kyle Krabs has an early second-round grade on him, but I think that he is such a good football player, and there's so much potential there. He came in as a highly recruited edge player, and he's moved inside full-time for Texas A&M, and he's 6'3.5". He's 305. He's about to run 4.8 at the combine. That's my prediction for him, and he's got some ridiculous power that you wouldn't expect from a former edge recruit. So Justin Madubuike is definitely a guy I think is not getting the love that he quite deserves, but a guy that I'm incredibly high on.
Okay. Man, Ryan, you gave us a lot of great information here today, man. I really appreciate it. Go ahead and tell the people what all you got going on. I know it's a busy time. You're going to the combine, but where can people find you on Twitter? And tell us more about the Draft Bible, because that sounds very interesting.
Yeah, man. So, first and foremost, I want to thank you for having me on, Grant. I really do appreciate it. As far as my work, Rise and Draft, it's RISE, capital N, Draft on Twitter is where you can find all my work. Links to everything. NFL Draft Bible, like you said. I also write for Pro Football Ready with the first pick, NFL Draft Lounge. Have all my stuff on there. And as far as NFL Draft Bible, I was lucky enough to come into contact with a man named Rick Saratella, who is the head of the Draft Bible. They've been going at it since 2002, and he's a guy that's made his living just working hard and doing his thing, man. And he's been a real blessing to me. Been a just a guy that's been taking me in almost from a mentor perspective. He's really valued my work. So if you want to listen to any of the podcasts, the prospect spotlights, you want to take a look at the Draft Bible, the Draft Bible draft guide that's coming out soon, definitely check out NFLDraftBible.com. And then Pro Football Ready, I have a lot of podcasts and written work on there as well. So definitely check that stuff out. Again, Rise and Draft on Twitter to follow me.